Mark Twain once said that 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the ones you did. Today, if you were to ask nurses who care for those in their final days, they'll tell you he was right. They hear the regrets of things left undone. Never told that one person that you loved them. Never wrote that novel. Never mended the fence with a dear friend. Never dyed your hair purple. Right now, there might be a few things coming to your mind that you wish you would have done. Or perhaps there's something you still desperately want to do that's weighing on your heart now. What if I told you there are reasons why all of us hold back from the things we truly want to do, and that if we can learn now to overcome these, we may find a surprising path to happiness? When I was 3 years old, my parents divorced, and my dad was granted full custody of me and my younger brother. Shortly after was the last time I saw my mother. This scenario is fairly rare today, but it was even more so in the early 90s. My dad worked a hard, labor-intensive job that required him to be gone for long hours at a time. This meant I became your stereotypical 90s latchkey kid. The long hours spent quietly at home made me long for connection and a belonging in a world where I felt very different. My solution for this was to go out for every extracurricular and club that was available to me. Basketball tryouts this weekend signed me up. It didn't matter that I was the shortest kid in my school and was never invited to play basketball at recess. Chess tournament at lunch, I'm in. It didn't matter that I had never played chess and knew none of the rules. And did I make the basketball team? Of course not. Was I the first person eliminated from the chess tournament? Absolutely. While each rejection hurt, particularly if it was something I was actually interested in, I was not deterred. I was going to find where I belonged. What I didn't know then was constantly putting myself out there, failing, and doing it all over again was building up my tolerance for risk, something I would later learn is a key to avoiding regret. When I was in junior high, my 8th grade geography teacher, Mr. Brandon, approached me about joining a new Model UN team he was coaching. I immediately said yes. I had no idea what it was, but yes, I was in, finally. He said he thought to ask me because I had showed an interest in geography and history and thought I would be a good addition to the team. I was thrilled. But then when I saw who else was on the team, I immediately started to feel nervous. See, on TV, they seem to show student bodies as cliques. You have your athletes, your academic kids, your pretty popular kids, and everyone has their group. Well, I went to a small school, and for some reason, that's not how it was. The pretty popular athletes were all the same kids. As an example, when I was a freshman in high school, the first chair trumpet player in the marching band was also captain of the football team on homecoming court, and also just a very nice guy. God really does give with both hands sometimes. And when I walked into that first meeting, I was greeted by the most popular, successful, smart kids in school, the ones that when they tried out for teams, made it. And I would be lying if I didn't immediately feel out of place. But Mr. Brandon was right. I really did enjoy Model UN, and I gave it everything I had. As the year went on, it was time for our Model UN conference, and they give awards to student delegates who do exceptionally well. Not for a second did I think I would be awarded anything. I was just happy to be there. And you might see where this is going, but I was awarded as an exceptional delegate, and that cemented in me the second most important foundation, that I could win every now and again. It wouldn't always be losses. And I'm really thankful that Mr. Brandon believed in me even when I didn't. And here's a picture of me with my award that I promise was taken in the 1990s and not the 1890s like it looks. Model UN also cemented in me a few other important things. A desire to work internationally and do work that benefited people. I decided I was going to join the Foreign Service, live abroad, and do work that had a positive impact on people's lives. As time went on, my life led me into a career in economic development rather than the Foreign Service. I have had the chance to work internationally, and in my opinion, do work that's had a positive impact on people's lives. I spend a lot of my time looking at and analyzing data, and I'm often compelled by comparative data between countries. Several years ago, I saw a report that you are also likely familiar with. It ranks the happiest countries in the world. Every year, it seems as though Norway and Finland are always in those top spots. And what is one to do but buy a bunch of sweaters and move to Norway? But then I got to thinking, why are they always in those top spots? Many people have opined that it's because of their high quality of life, robust social programs, and low social inequality that's to account for this. And I have no doubt that those things do add up to a more satisfying day-to-day life. But when I looked at the list, there were other countries that also had those things, but found themselves much lower on the list. And this sent me on a quest to understand why. A few years later, I found another set of data by a social scientist named Gert Hofstede, who analyzes countries on 6 different dimensions: power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation, and indulgence. I then wanted to look at the countries that were the happiest and unhappiest and compare them in these categories and see if there were any similarities. I also wanted to look at countries that had various geographies, cultures, and historical contexts to see if those similarities remained. What I found was there were similarities in 3 key areas: individualism, uncertainty avoidance, and indulgence. So let's look at 3 countries that are high on the happiness index, but have various geographies, cultures, and historical contexts, like Norway, Canada, and New Zealand. All 3 of these countries rank relatively high on individualism. What this points to is a strong need to care for yourself, your family, and a strong importance on self-reliance. All 3 of these countries rank mid-range on uncertainty avoidance. So they aren't charging into things without thinking about them, but they're also not closing themselves off to new ideas or opportunities. All 3 of these countries rank high on indulgence, which points to a strong need and desire to follow one's own passions, interests, and hobbies, and to follow your own passions and dreams. Now let's look at 3 countries that rank lower on the happiness rankings: Japan, Peru, and Portugal. As you might imagine, these 3 countries rank lower on individualism, which points to a stronger need to care for the needs of the collective rather than your own. They rank high on uncertainty avoidance, which means they are much less likely to take on something new, like starting a business or writing that novel. All 3 rank very low on indulgence, which means they feel much less like they can or should pursue their own dreams or desires. What does this all mean when we think about regrets and happiness? Take a moment to think about something you've always wanted to do but haven't done. Why didn't you do it? Was it because you were afraid to fail? Because you didn't think you could do it on your own? Or because somewhere deep down you didn't think you deserved to pursue that dream or passion? When I was in high school, I saw an opportunity to attend a summer camp at Stanford. Being who I was, someone who went out for everything, I obviously applied. My history teacher, Mrs. Hoops, kindly wrote me a letter of recommendation, and I sent it off with hopes, but 0 expectations. Sometime later, I got a letter back from Stanford. I'd been accepted. Me, Stanford, I couldn't believe it. Even now, it seems amazing to say out loud. But then I looked at the next page that detailed the cost and the options for room and board, and my heart sank. I don't remember how much it cost, but it was a lot to me. I showed the letter to my dad, and he said, "Good job," but no follow-up conversation about the cost. I had a job, but I didn't have enough money to pay for this. I could have asked my dad for help, and he might have said yes, but I didn't do that. I just folded up the letter and put it away in a box in my room. Still today, I regret not finding a way to pay for that experience. Why didn't I try harder to figure that out? If you'd asked me then, I don't think I could have articulated the reasons why. But now that I've had a chance to look at this data, I now understand that I didn't feel truly deserving of spending that kind of money on a camp for me. That was for smarter kids. That money would have been wasted on sending me there. Stanford thought I was deserving enough, but I didn't. There are so many ways I could have learned to pay for that experience, but I didn't because I didn't feel truly deserving of it. So many of the opportunities we have or don't have come down to whether or not we believe we can do things, whether or not we're okay with the risk, and whether or not we believe we deserve it. It wasn't until I started looking at this data that I started to see the patterns and the things that I regretted not doing, and also the things that I was really proud of myself for doing. Years later, I'd be talking with a coworker, and she would say that it was her dream to go hot air ballooning. I told her she should go. There was a place not far from there, and she could save up for the trip. And she immediately said, "Oh, no, maybe someday." And I could see on her face that she didn't feel as though she deserved to spend that kind of money on something like that for her, on something so frivolous. The things that we don't do and end up regretting later are not just the big things in life, like asking the love of your life to get married or going back to school to start a new career. It can be the more whimsical things in life, like backpacking the Pacific Crest Trail or taking a watercolor class, learning to scuba dive, or going up in a hot air balloon. Years later, when my husband and I had graduated college and we had just become engaged, we decided we were going to go to New Zealand for a year, live in a van, and have an adventure. The year was 2009, the economy was terrible, and we figured we'd go have this adventure for a year and come back and the economy would magically be better. It wasn't. But when we told people this idea, they thought we were crazy. They thought living in a van for a year together was a surefire way to a quick divorce. People questioned why we would quit jobs when we were lucky enough to have them at the time. Why would we go to a country we'd never been to before and knew not a single person? Why would we take such a risk? But I knew then that if we didn't do this now, when we had nothing holding us back, no mortgage, no kids, no real responsibilities, that we would never do it. And that thought made me feel sick. So a few weeks before our first anniversary, we left with $13,000. With that, we needed to buy a van, live for a year, and have enough for return tickets home. It sounds crazy now to think about it, but we did it. We had an amazing adventure, nobody died, and we didn't get divorced. And I'm so glad that I didn't listen to the people who told us we were crazy. So much of our belief in our ability to do things comes from the feedback we get from others. And here's that van we lived in. Her name was Delilah. She broke down no less than 5 times that year, but I still cried at the end of our trip when we sold her. Shortly after coming back from our trip, my husband and I were daydreaming about moving to the Oregon coast. The idea of living by the beach was very alluring, and the Oregon coast reminded us a lot of our time in New Zealand. And my husband said we would move if I found my dream job, but only my dream job. He didn't want to move for just another job where we would feel unfulfilled. So I only applied for jobs that met that criteria. Sometime shortly after, I got a call that I had been accepted for an interview for an executive director position with an economic development agency. Definitely my dream job. There was only one problem. It was scheduled for when we were meant to be in Italy. We'd been saving for years for this trip to celebrate our anniversary, and I was filled with a moment of panic and doubt. Did I really want to cut days off of our dream trip to go out for an interview I probably wasn't going to get? I imagined that the other candidates were more experienced than me, more familiar with the area than me, and much more likely to get the job than me. Why cut off our dream trip for something like that? But then I thought, and I knew, that if I didn't go for it and at least try, I'd always have to live with the regret of not knowing what I could do. So we changed our trip, we flew out to Oregon, and I was going to give it my best shot. I walked into the reception that was being held for me and the other candidate, and my worst fears had been realized. The other candidate was older than me. He was more familiar with the area with me. In fact, he was from Oregon, and he even knew some of the people in the room. I should have stayed in Rome, I thought. But I was there, and so I was going to give it my best shot. We flew back home after the interview, and I was pretty certain my chances were slim. I was still glad that I tried, but not at all optimistic. A couple days later, I got a phone call. I had gotten my dream job, and I'm so glad that I didn't let my fear of the unknown keep me from seeing what I could do. Shortly before we moved, we met up with some friends, and they asked if we knew people out in Oregon, if we had family there. And we said we didn't know a single person there. They looked shocked and said, I could never do that. And I thought people move all sorts of places for all sorts of reasons. We'll meet people when we get there. But then I thought more about that comment when I started looking at the data. How many opportunities do we keep ourselves from because of the fear of uncertainty, because of the fear that we can't do something on our own, or because we're not sure that we're deserving of it? I'm certain that I went for it because I was okay with the risk of failure, and because I knew my chances, no matter how slim, that I could be successful. And there are those 2 key categories again: low risk aversion and self-reliance. The third, indulgence, is honestly something that I'm still working on. And while I know there are unhappy people in Norway and happy people in Japan, and suddenly having this knowledge will not make you a risk taker or make you believe in yourself or make you comfortable with indulging in your dreams or fantasies, but I hope that when you leave here today, that you'll take a moment to ask yourself what you would regret not doing if today was your very last day. Say that thing out loud, write it down, close your eyes and imagine yourself doing it. And then when you know what that thing is, ask yourself, why haven't I done it yet?